With AEW contracts expiring for 2 top stars and more, this is Wrestling Hub. My name is John, and you're watching the Wrestling Report for November 28th. Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Hub and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wrestling Hub Official, and also follow us on Twitter at Wrestling_Hub. On his 83 Weeks podcast, Eric Bischoff talked about WWE not wanting to alter the presentation of their product, saying it is undeniable that the product is formulaic. In fact, so formulaic that I think Cookie Cutter is another good example. Unfortunately, the style and the presentation of WWE, whether it's Raw or SmackDown, is so formulaic and cookie cutter that yes, there are different names that you're watching on screen, but everything else is exactly the same. I think that's one of the things that's hurting WWE in terms of ratings or growing the audience. Let's be honest, in terms of ratings, WWE is doing just fine compared to other television programs, and they're making money hand over fist in the process. Wonderful for them. But when you look at audience attrition and the fact that nobody's really building a new audience, yes, they're satisfying a new audience, but how long has it been since anybody's actually built and embraced and attracted people that hadn't been wrestling fans? It hasn't happened since Nitro, and nothing is happening today that leads me to believe it's going to happen in the future. Everybody will make the existing audience happy, but nobody is really growing the audience. In WWE's case, I think it's incumbent upon them to change the format and quit being so damn predictable, and focus on the episodic nature of the product, and do things that make people remember or realize that yes, this show is live, and by virtue of being live, you can't afford to miss it because anything can happen. To me, that is such a fundamental fix and way to approach the business. There's no reason not to do it. There really isn't. It drives me crazy. Despite being good friends during their time in WWE, Eddie Guerrero apparently tried to fight Kurt Angle backstage as Angle recalled the events that took place on Talk Is Jericho. What happened was we had a fight in the ring. We were getting heat on Eddie. It was Luther Reigns, Mark Jindrak, and myself. I didn't touch Eddie, so I couldn't have been the one that stiffed him. Jindrak and Reigns were getting heat on Eddie, and when I got backstage, Eddie came back. After the show, we all wait in Gorilla and shake each other's hands. I went to shake his hand and say, "Thank you, Eddie." He goes, "No, what you did out there was wrong. You were stiffing me." I said, "Eddie, I didn't touch you." He said, "BS. You were stiffing me. You were beating me up." I pushed him. I didn't know what to do. He made me so mad, so I pushed him. He double legs me in amateur wrestling double leg. I get him down and got him in a front headlock and started choking him out. So Big Show comes in, and this is embarrassing. Talk about having little guy syndrome. Big Show grabs me by the back of my singlet, pulls me up and puts me in one corner, takes Eddie, puts Eddie in another corner. He said, "You guys are done." Now I'm pissed at Big Show. I said, "Don't you ever touch me like that again." Big Show was so damn strong. He lifted me up with one hand and my legs were kicking. We get backstage and I felt bad, so I go to Eddie's locker room to apologize. I get back there and I knock on the door. He opens the door and doesn't say anything. I said, "Eddie, listen, I just want to say I'm sorry." You know what Eddie said to me? "I'm not ready yet." So I go inside and I started whacking him. I'm fighting Eddie. We are throwing punches. Bradshaw pulled us apart and is like, "Guys, you've got to stop." I'm like, "Well, I said I was sorry, and this asshole doesn't want to say he's sorry back." But that's Eddie. Eddie's going to apologize when he wants to, and I should have known that. While he was released from WWE last year, Angle has noted that he is still on good terms with WWE, so we'll have to see if he makes a return to the company. With Bryan Danielson looking set to take on Hangman Page for the AEW World title, he talked on the Wrestling Classic about his future opponent being champion, saying, "I think Hangman Page is awesome. I think that when people connect like that with a crowd, it becomes magic. Like, that is definitely what you want." He really is not somebody who had, Kenny Omega had a name coming in. The previous champions, you know what I mean? You look at Jericho, you look at Moxley and Kenny. Kenny was not in WWE, and he had made a huge name for himself in Japan and all that stuff. Hangman really did not have that big of a name. I look at him as an AEW homegrown star. So it's really cool when I am on a show. So when he came out in one ladder match, the loudest reaction of that day was Hangman Page. To me, that was really cool. For me, that speaks volumes of him as far as how he's been able to progress. It speaks volumes of AEW where they trust somebody to do that. In AEW, being the world champion is a big thing. Speaking of Danielson, he would note on the Casual Conversations podcast that he cannot wait to work with CM Punk. Who better to team with than Punk? Although, I always thought and said this even when I was in WWE. It felt to me like Punk and I were destined to do a WrestleMania match together, and then it never happened. I felt like, man, it's so perfect and it makes so much sense that we would have this WrestleMania match against each other, but it never happened. Given the time of how long it's been since we've been in a ring against each other or even as a tag team, like now I feel like when we do it, it'll be big and big in a different way. That's something I look forward to. I also like the idea of us battling each other over who the real best in the world is. I think that sounds like a lot of fun. Since Dark Side of the Ring's Plane Ride from Hell documentary came out, Ric Flair's pro wrestling career has appeared to be in limbo, as many are unsure if he will be able to sign with a promotion like AEW. On his podcast, Flair noted that he was offered a match against a current champion in AEW. Yeah, listen, it's funny you brought that up because there's a promoter in Israel that wants me to wrestle your buddy Sammy Guevara in Israel. I said $100,000 and 2 first-class tickets and I'm there, 50% and 50% after I beat Sammy. Flair would go on to note that he is in better shape now than he was in 2001, with fans having to wait and see if he makes a comeback. With Drew McIntyre on SmackDown, he has stated that his goal was to work his way up to eventually challenge Roman Reigns for the Universal title. Now, WWE has put McIntyre in a recycled angle with him getting screwed by authority figures. As Dave Meltzer explained on Wrestling Observer Radio, so the key stuff is that Brock Lesnar is back next week, and they're doing a new gimmick where the authority figures are trying to screw with Drew McIntyre, which is an entirely new storyline that WWE has never done before, but that's what they're doing. They're repeating the stuff from the past. I mean, that's what we're seeing everywhere. Many are aware that Vince McMahon is not big on using the words pro wrestling with his company, opting for the phrase sports entertainment instead. On Bally Sports, R-Truth revealed what pro wrestling terms McMahon is not fond of. I'll take any belt and take it to the highest of beltstivity. That's what I do, and it's not called a belt. It's called a championship or a title. Vince McMahon believes a belt is something you use to keep your pants up, so it's a championship title. You see what I'm saying? I would take any of those championship titles because they're all prestigious titles. It's an accomplishment. If you win one of the tag team titles, it's an accomplishment. So I think that any of them would be honored to have. At WrestleMania 25, Jeff Hardy would be pitted against his brother in an Extreme Rules match, with Matt coming out on top. On Broken Skull Sessions, Jeff recalled his anger following the match due to it being short. Vince McMahon and I ended up having a conversation after that. I think he sort of liked that he saw how mad I was because I was throwing stuff. I cannot believe we were not able to do that stuff we wanted to do. We did a lot more than enough, but it was still. The passion within me really ignited that night after the match. I was genuinely upset. Jeff Hardy did hint at a reunion with his brother, as that could happen after his WWE contract expires. With WWE making many cuts to their roster over the last couple of years, many are under the impression that this is being done to entice buyers for a potential sale of the company. On his 83 Weeks podcast, Eric Bischoff would dispel this notion, as he said, "One of the reasons I was so steadfast, in my opinion, that WWE under Vince McMahon will never sell is because of the strong impression that I had over many years, and even working with Vince very closely for a short time. It's so obvious to me that Vince holds the legacy of his father and grandfather so highly. It's evident when you walk into Vince's office, right? It's not a mystery. You can figure it out pretty quickly. I've just always believed, because of that legacy and how highly apparent to me that Vince holds that legacy, and that he's got Stephanie and Shayna by virtue of marriage, Triple H, and he's got grandchildren. I just would believe that I've always believed that Vince would be far more predisposed to allowing his family to carry on that legacy that means so much to Vince." Given MJF's AEW contract will run out in 2024, AEW President Tony Khan has noted that he is ready for a bidding war over the star with WWE. Still, WWE might not cough up a ton of money when it comes time. With it said on Wrestling Observer Radio, I had a conversation with him about it, and I don't think he is going anywhere. I mean, if the financial deal was really ridiculous by WWE, but who knows what they're thinking in 2024. They usually don't give ridiculous deals to someone who has never, in their mind, been a big deal. I could see there being a big bidding war. It's just a question of how high they're willing to go. I wouldn't say he's locked into AEW, but all things being equal, he won't be leaving AEW. Staying on the topic of AEW contracts, it seems the deals for Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes are running out, with Wade Keller of Post Wrestling stating, "There are people I've talked to in AEW who are looking at their contracts and wondering what their deal is going to be next time when their first deals come up and how much leverage they're going to have with WWE or New Japan or heck, GCW with their ticket sales these days, or the indie scene as an option to book yourself. It's going to be interesting to watch. I have heard the intent and the hope is that Cody and Kenny and Tony all come to deals. There's not signs that any of them want to leave or are disgruntled to the point that they shouldn't be able to come to an extension, but I don't know the situation. Maybe Cody and Kenny already signed extensions and they kept it quiet. Actually, I'm pretty sure that hasn't happened now that I think about it. From people I've talked to, I think Cody and Kenny might be next in terms of signing extensions. At a recent WWE live event, Kevin Owens can be seen wearing a Bloodline t-shirt while making his way to the ring. KO looks like he is possibly sending a message, as many are thinking he will not be re-signing with WWE when his contract runs out in January. When it came to his time in the Octagon, Brock Lesnar was able to prove himself in the UFC heavyweight division and become champion. Still, a fellow wrestler and MMA fighter in Chael Sonnen had this to say about Brock's abilities. Nobody else talks about it. I bring it up to try to prove a point. When you have Francis Ngannou, who's 260 pounds of steel, and you put him in with Stipe Miocic, who's 230 pounds. There's 30 pounds the right way disadvantage to Stipe. Brock Lesnar does not enjoy my company. I've been around Brock and he's been a gentleman, but I can tell he'd rather be anywhere else but me. But one point that I make about Brock, it's not meant to slight him. Brock was not a very good wrestler. That's true. Brock never had Olympic aspirations. Brock was 265 pounds of steel. In the NCAA finals, he took on someone who weighed 220 pounds. There's a 45-pound weight discrepancy. It's a fair point by me and it irritates Brock, but I'm right. I am right when I say it about Francis. And this was your Pro Wrestling News Update. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.